Hi, folks. Pastor Mike Spalding here with my good friend and big brother.
I'm Pastor Casper, and we're here together to encourage you to keep listening to Deception Detection Radio, because we're both on this network with our individual shows.
Yes,
and
yes.
we're going to be doing some things together as well. Nudge, nudge, say no more.
Hey, folks, tune in Deception Detection Radio. Some of the best programming in Christian talk, news, encouragement, and Bible studies. God bless you.
God bless.
Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you.
Welcome to Deception Detection Radio. I'm Kay.
And I'm Chad.
We pray you all had a blessed week. We all must admit that this world we live in is extremely sick and depraved. Satan is seen to put the largest target on the innocence of children. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that the first hushed whispers of pedophilia in the Catholic Church were murmured, only to become louder with each passing decade. The really sickening part is that the sadistic torture and rituals inflicted on the small children started centuries ago. Then came trafficking, add politicians, and about every other at one time respected position held. Is there no end? Tonight we have joining us Johnny Cirucci, author of Eaters of Children, The Pedocracy Exposed. Johnny has taken the time to research and put together the most comprehensive book I have ever read on the subject, almost 800 pages. Coming to us straight from Resistance Rising is radio host, author, and our brother in Christ, Johnny Cirucci. Welcome back, Johnny. This is part 3. How are you?
I'm great, Kay. It's so exciting to be back with you guys. Really, our last interview went shockingly well, so I'm pumped, and hopefully we'll have a similar experience technically, and I know we will as far as the information we discussed.
Yes, last time too, and it went so fast because it was so fascinating. So I'm going to ask you to please say the opening prayer, and then we're going to get started.
Absolutely. Lord, we just lift up this time together in fellowship and ask that you put your hand upon what we discussed today so that the most important information can get to those who need it. And I ask this in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you, Johnny. Well, as I mentioned, this is part 3 about your book, Eaters of Children, The Pedocracy Exposed, How Access to Power is Granted Through Rape, Torture, and Ritualistic Slaughter of the Innocent. For those of you tuning in that haven't heard part 1 and part 2, you may want to go back and listen to those before we get into tonight, because they're absolutely fascinating. Johnny, we're going to talk about the Eaters of Children, the part about the milk-carton. Let me start that part again. Johnny, we're going to talk about the milk-carton kids tonight, which I was shocked to find out that it ties in with the pedocracy of our children. Let's get into that.
You bet. Really, as I'm sure most of us remember in our lifetimes, that this was something that was table conversation for families all over America. Depending upon who you look up for information, the details are kind of sketchy as to who started it and when, maybe as early as 1979. I highlight a boy named Kevin Collins. although some sources point to Eaton Patz, E-A-T-A-N, P-A-T-Z, and disappeared in New York City. I think I have a much better case in regards to Kevin Collins because he was the first boy to reach national prominence thanks to major magazines like Time Life, and of course these were all William Randolph Hearst and other Knights of Malta were able to really propel this as an issue. But I cover this in chapter 18 of my book, Eaters of Children. And as I say in the beginning of chapter 18, really it was just a propaganda effort. By the mid-1980s, it became quite apparent to American families that something very wrong was going on in relation to their children. Children were showing up missing in shocking numbers. And as a matter of fact, those numbers have never really been verified or codified. They can go anywhere from 200,000 to 2 million. No one really knows exactly how many children are going missing. They just know that a large, shockingly large number do go missing. And as I show you in Eaters of Children, unfortunately, police, judges, and prosecutors are in on it. Again and again, they show that they're in on it. And when they don't do their jobs, it's quite apparent. And they needed a smokescreen to allay the fears of families. And it was lit upon in the 80s to crowdsource this problem. And so no one knows for sure, at least no one in media is admitting exactly where this cropped up, this idea. Whose idea was it originally? It seems to be relatively decentralized. A dairy here and a dairy there suddenly decided to, it kind of seems like a marketing scheme to play upon sympathy, to say, oh, hey, we're the better dairy people because we're going to help you find missing children. And so we're going to put children on these milk cartons. One source, I think, let's see, I have Slate magazine and Slate.com recommending of the possible different sources for this, who really got it started. Wisconsin's Hawthorne Melody Farm Dairy. And it's interesting that I just have a formula for tracking things down. And it involves looking at key people, key personnel. Are they Roman Catholic? Are they Catholic trained? Are they Jesuit trained? Do they have family members that are Catholic? And not to say, and I give this disclaimer every time, not to say that every Catholic is an enemy agent of Rome. It just says that when Rome is manipulating, she likes to use her own. And so sure enough, the CEO at the time of Hawthorne Melody was a gentleman named Walter Woodbury, and I found his obituary in the Chicago Tribune. And it says at the bottom of the obituary, a funeral mass will be held at 10 a.m. Saturday, and this was 1999, in St. Ignatius Catholic Church in Chicago. Surprise, surprise. And Chicago is an absolute epicenter of power for the Jesuits and for the Catholic Church, as is New Orleans, as is San Francisco, as is Boston, Baltimore. All the major cities really have a large Jesuit footprint, large Roman Catholic footprint. And so, it all comes together. Surprise, surprise. All the same sources. And the continuity is even their victims, when they choose to highlight victims, for instance, Kevin Collins as a highlighted victim. Now, thousands of children go missing every year, but Kevin Collins is the little boy that was highlighted and, as I said, picked by the usual propaganda sources to be lifted up. And that's Kevin Collins' family were devout Roman Catholics, and he was actually coming home from the Jesuit school where he was going to school, St. Agnes Jesuit school and parish in San Francisco. So even their victims, whether patsies, victims, and criminals, they all have, unfortunately, the same, what I call euphemistically Jesuit breadcrumbs, but in general it's just Catholic breadcrumbs.
Did they have to pay? I wanted to kind of get into that too. That people actually have to pay to have their loved ones put on the milk cartons. Did they have to pay with him?
No, it was voluntarily and volunteered by, and actually they were found. It's because he fit. He was a child family of Roman Catholics, devout Roman Catholics, very large family, the Collins family. And like I said, not just a Catholic parish, but a Jesuit parish. So he was chosen as the poster child. He may not have been the first, but he was the first biggest. And it was Newsweek, which is a subsidiary of Henry Luce, another Knight of Malta. Henry Luce's Time magazine, an offshoot, was Newsweek, that put this on the cover. Was the March 19th, 1984 cover of Newsweek that propelled little Kevin Collins to be basically the poster child of this effort.
That's interesting. And then with the ones, like you'd mentioned, Eaton Pat's, he was Jewish.
Yeah, it fits perfectly, Kay. It absolutely fits perfectly to either one or the other. But as I repeatedly tell folks, the power play here involved, these are patsy Jews. These are Jews who are being lifted up by the Romans to hide behind, because nothing screens the Roman hand better than frothing people up with ethnic hatred. So Eaton Pat's, although may have been one of the earlier victims, he's not as well known. He was not as well publicized as Kevin Collins.
He didn't seem to get publicized until they found someone that fit the mold of the person that possibly killed him, and they tried this man, found him guilty, but they never found a body.
Yeah, and what else was
strange.
What else was also very helpful was one of the suspects. Was it Hernandez? There's a suspect Ramos and another suspect Hernandez. One of them made a confession in his Catholic church. So, it all seems like it's a big ploy. It's a big propaganda ploy. And very often, there is no justice. Very often, there is no justice. Time and time again, anyone who is really guilty is not tried until they're dead, and so they don't get a trial at all, or they're tried when they're very old, and the crimes are well in the past. So, the same thing with this Golden State Killer, right? They say that a cop has finally been tried as the Golden State Killer, and he's in his 70s. How many decades after these crimes have been committed? Is justice really going to get served? No, of course not. Go ahead, Chad. You were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to ask, when you were doing all this research into the milk-carton kids and everything, did any of your research lead you to the television show America's Most Wanted with John Walsh?
Yeah, I have. Let me look John up here. I have some info on John and his background. Of course, his son went missing. I know I have
Adam Walsh.
Yeah, I have a dossier on him here. Let's see here.
Didn't mean to throw you for a loop there. It's just I was curious because that was another thing. I know that blew up big time after Adam Walsh. I remember the made-for-TV movie on that, and then, like I said, America's Most Wanted became like a staple in everybody's home. Everybody tuned in, and it was basically for missing children, but also started looking for people on the run that were on the Most Wanted list. Oh,
just flipping through here, and I see that he is a good friend of Donald Trump. Let's see here. Philanthropist. Oh, let's see here. Nation's Most Wanted. Yeah. And large family. And let me see. I'm trying to scan through quickly to get the punchline here. Lives in Washington, D.C. Let's see here. He also came up in the case of Johnny Gosh. But let's see. That's not what I wanted. Let's see here. Oh, yep, there he is. Raised in a supportive Roman Catholic home. Surprise, surprise. Yep, that's from biography.com. There it is. All traces back. Even their supposed whistleblowers are all part of a propaganda system. So they're never going to get too close to the truth. They know how to dance close to the truth, and they always use their own on either side. We mentioned, you mentioned in your prep, Kay, David Politis.
Well, on the bullet points. Very
David
curious.
Paulide's missing 411.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if he was onto something.
Oh, he's onto something, all right. He's onto a massive disinformation effort, having been trained by the Jesuits at the University of San Francisco and having to leave law enforcement because of, I believe, a misdemeanor infraction where he misrepresented himself. So he claims, if you listen to Politis, he claims he's an expert in two completely separate areas. That's missing children and Bigfoot. And the two never mix. But because he's got his hands in both cookie jars, of course they're going to mix. So even though he pretends to say, don't ever say Bigfoot is taking children, when you walk away from David Politis, that's exactly what you walk away with. So he is basically, again, he's very similar to the milk-carton kids. People are getting really upset over what is happening to their children. And so these propagandists are placed in our midst to distract us. And that's what Politis does. He gives some fascinating information. A lot of it is very accurate, very disturbing as far as children going missing. And then he muddies the water up with a bunch of subterfuge and never answers the question, what's really going on with the children? That's because that's not his job. His job is to muddy the waters. Like I said, having been trained by the Jesuits at the University of San Francisco.
That was the sound of my jaw hitting the floor. Well, I know children and adults come up missing every single day. But is it being made out to be more than actually are? Or is it being made
to
out...
a minor degree, yes, good question. To a minor degree, I think it is. Because what my research has shown, shockingly, is that families are usually involved in the crimes, in children going missing. And so it's kind of rare that a child is... Kevin Collins is a great example of what rarely happens, that a child just gets grabbed off the street. Unfortunately, very often, very usually, the family is involved, and the family offers the children. And sickeningly, in the case of many Catholic families, it basically, that's what it turns out to be. It basically turns out to be that Catholic family offering their children to pedophile priests because they never actively, aggressively pursue. You never, hardly ever, I don't know course, now I'm just speaking off the cuff on this, but I don't remember ever coming across a Catholic. There may have been one or two, and I've looked at dozens of specific individual cases. I can't call to mind a single case where a Catholic parent was furious, tried to cause bodily harm to the priest, or went directly to law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, social services in an effort to get instant justice. Almost every time that I can think of off the top of my head, that parent went to the clergy, and the clergy did nothing. So basically, they just offered their children up to a pedophile priest. And more often than not, the clergy didn't do it. It's not the clergy didn't do anything. It's the clergy waited until things got too hot and then carefully moved the pedophile to green pastures, to a new diocese of unsuspecting families where they could rape children again and again and again. And this shows more than anything else. This isn't just one story. I have specific examples a dozen times over. It is systemic. It is an agenda of the Catholic Church all the way to the top. Let me say this again. It is an agenda of the Catholic Church all the way to the top to abuse as many children as possible. That sounds outrageous. What do I have? A couple thousand citations of open sources in Eaters of Children. I'll give you an example. Right off the top of my head. The Spotlight, John Gagan. The Spotlight example. They blew this up. 2001, the Boston Globe, supposed investigation of mega pedophile priest John Gagan, which was highlighted again in the 2015 movie with Liev Schreiber and Michael Keaton and all-star cast.
Excellent movie. I can't think of the title, though.
Spotlight. The movie, the title was Spotlight. And it was a fantastic movie, and the disinformation of the movie was that journalists do their jobs, which they really don't. This was all cleared well ahead of time to receive the spotlight of Spotlight. Gagan was defrocked. And the number of times that a pedophile priest is defrocked are probably the same number of times that a Catholic family goes to the police to report one. Maybe twice, 3 times I've come across. Actually, defrocking a priest, top of my head, I think twice is the only twice that I've come across Catholic Church defrocking a pedophile priest, and Gagan is one of them. He was defrocked in 1998. So he was already cleared for the spotlight of a Spotlight investigation, which didn't start until 3 years later.
Well, even the newspaper didn't even want to touch it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Roving Jewish editor Marty Barron came in, basically a circuit riding fixer. Guy bouncing from paper to paper, first in the door, which is very, very suspicious. Very suspicious. First agenda in the door as he sits down as editor of the Boston Globe. Hey, let's relook at this John Gagan thing that you glossed over a few years. Actually, it's based on several previous investigations that they didn't pursue. Paul Shanley and several pedophile priests in the Boston Archdiocese. By the way, Paul Shanley, did you know Father Paul Shanley was a co-founder of NAMBLA?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Did you know that? Roman Catholic priest from Boston is a co-founder of NAMBLA. For some reason, nobody talks about that.
For those of you listening, NAMBLA stands for North American Man-Boy Love Association.
Yep.
And it's right out in the open pedophilia. They don't try to hide.
Now, how many people know that a Roman Catholic priest co-founded NAMBLA? Who was later... Oh, and the best part about this is, now Gagan was jailed and thrown into a cell with the man who killed... The guy was a hitchhiker. and he got into a vehicle, and the guy who was driving the vehicle basically assaulted him. It was a homosexual assault. And so he was in prison. It was the harshest sentence anybody had ever seen for something like that. And Gagin was thrown into a cell with this guy. Surprise, surprise, he murdered Gagin. Stomped them to death. What a shocker. What a surprise. Never saw that coming. So for whatever reason, Gagin was selected to be a sacrificial pedophile. The one that just got hammered by the system. And do you know what they did after that? They nullified his conviction. Not lying to you. Look that up. The prosecutors nullified his conviction because he died. Have you ever heard of that before?
That'd be like expunging Dahmers.
Yeah. The victims. Oh, Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer's daddy was Jesuit trained by the Jesuits at Marquette in engineering. Surprise, surprise. Chemical engineering. This was information that would come very handy to Dahmer later on. And Dahmer's prosecutor was a Jesuit priest. Did you know that? Jeffrey Dahmer's prosecutor was a Jesuit priest. Did you know that Jesuits practice law? That the Jesuits are part and parcel to American judicial process like that? One of the best books you could possibly read is Tupper Saucy's Rulers of Evil. And one of the main reasons why he wrote it was because he was prosecuted for tax evasion by a Jesuit priest as representing the United States government. Read that in his prologue, I think. And Jeffrey Dahmer's defense attorney was an incompetent idiot who was also trained by the Jesuits at Marquette. What a surprise.
Now, is this out? I know that you have your way that you're able to investigate and find these things out about who's a Jesuit, but is it hidden that well that the common, just everyday lay person could look this up?
Absolutely buried. Absolutely buried. Absolutely buried. You have to really dig, and depending upon the person, there have been, oh my goodness. Now, everything that I say, I give sources and citations for. As a matter of fact, let me see. Let me pull up an example. I want to say his name was Murray, the former Seattle mayor. Oh, I hate to look this up online. Let's see here. Oh, mayor. Yeah, I think it was Murray. Ed Murray. Yeah, Ed Murray. Now, Ed Murray. Okay, so Ed Murray was married in an Episcopalian service to another man. Episcopalian, Anglican, Orthodox. They're all junior branches, or they're junior sisters of the Catholic Church. They're so similar. It gave the Catholic Church plausible deniability. I found the citations and the information that show that Ed Murray, let me give you the full story. Ed Murray, mayor of Seattle, and repeatedly accused of pedophilia. He and his, husband, significant other, adopted a little boy and then raped him. How it is that homosexual couples can openly adopt children is in and of itself an unbelievable crime of corruption. How it is, it's bad enough that homosexual couples can so easily marry, that repeatedly you have these judges who have no accountability to the people deciding for an entire state that they will overrule the state's laws and allow homosexual couples to get married. That's the foot in the door. And then following on shortly after that is the adoption of children by homosexual couples, particularly male couples. And so Ed Murray, the mayor of Seattle, another excellent example of this unbelievable, sickening corruption. He and his partner, his husband, adopted a child and raped the child. Now, this came out, and he still refused to step down. He said, well, I've never been convicted. No one's arrested me. Well, of course, because the entire system is sickeningly corrupt. I found out that Ed Murray is a former Jesuit seminarian. In other words, he went to a Jesuit seminary to become a priest and was not ordained, just didn't complete it. Very similar to his, let's see, Seattle is Washington, very similar to the governor of California, Jerry Moonbeam Brown. How do you get to be a governor in the 70s and again 30 years later? You go to Jesuit seminary, whether you finish or not. So Ed Murray finally stepped down after another handful more people came forward and said, this guy is a pedophile. He has still not been touched by any law enforcement whatsoever. One of his cousins came forward and said he assaulted me as a child. So it is very, very difficult sometimes to get the information on these individuals, but I am very specific. If there's someone that I say, and I don't have off the top of my head the sources, I will give you the sources.
Do you remember back when years back when they came out about the 5,200 employees at the Pentagon had been looking at child porn on government computers?
Yes, I do. I do. And I'll guarantee you that whenever you see look deeper. I love to tell my audience on my show, Resistance Rising, I love to play the clip from, I think, the old Wendy's commercial, Where's the Beef? The three old ladies, where's the beef? That's a big fluffy bun. Where's the beef? I also like to play the clip from the Tom Cruise movie, was it Jerry Maguire, with the Cuba Gooding Jr., where he makes him say, show me the money. So makes him scream it really loud, show me the money. Always look to the bottom of those stories for anything of substance. And by the way, let's take this issue, anything of substance, and go back to the milk-carton kids. There is not a single statistic that shows that the thousands upon thousands of milk cartons with kids' faces on them did any good whatsoever. It was 100% a propaganda effort to make people think that cops were just so desperate to do their jobs, they needed to crowdsource information. Nothing, not zero. Not a single child has been proven to have been found as a result of having their picture on a milk carton and someone recognizing them and turning them into law enforcement acting on it. Zero. Show me the money. So you got a report of not just pornography being used on government computers, child pornography. Now that should be instant radar on both federal and local law enforcement. That should be the most difficult thing for you to now guarantee you. If you're not plugged into the system, it is. If you're perusing child pornography and you're not a protected pedophile, that's another reason why I throw the BS flag on these, hundreds of arrests of pedophiles and not a single name you recognize. The pedophiles at the top, Donald Trump, his buddy Jeffrey Epstein, pedophile pimp. Oh, Jeffrey's a great guy. Loves his women on the younger side like I do. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, pedophiles. Jorge Mario Bergoglio. His number 3 man, George Pell, the financier of the Vatican. Finally, now he escaped. He left Australia, went to Rome, and it was safe there. They finally brought him back to Australia to stand trial on is the only one that I can say that has a lot of coverage. The only cardinal. They never, ever allow cardinals or bishops to have coverage as pedophiles themselves. They're just pedophile movers. Pell is the only mainstream example that I have of a cardinal accused himself of being a pedophile. And you know what? One of the main victims, the main victim that had accused him, died before they could go to trial. I hate when that happens. Look that up. Pedophile accuser dies before the trial. I hate that. I hate when that happens.
It happens a lot, doesn't it?
It does. It's it's too bad. And if you watch that fantastic movie Spotlight, what do they admit at the very end? Where's the beef? Show me the money. What do they admit at the very end? The biggest criminal of the entire operation was Bernard Cardinal Law. Bernie Law. Sometimes you got to put the cardinal in the middle, like a middle name that shows that they're aristocratic, like Alfred Lord Tennyson. You know, that's the whole purpose of cardinalcies and the papacy, is to show the power of the feudalist aristocracy. They're no different than kings and lords. So they tell you at the end of the Spotlight movie, the biggest criminal of all was Bernie Law, who carefully shielded these monsters from prosecution and moved them. As the movie opens, you see, and I forget who it was at the time, you see that the bishop at the time, in telling the prosecutor, he's talking to the victim's parents at the police station, and he waves the prosecutor off. Oh, we'll just be a few more minutes. You stand outside. I'll take care of this. Absolutely accurate. Absolutely accurate. The movie ends telling you in subtitles that Bernard Law left Boston as the heat started to rise and enjoyed a very, very cushy retirement. He just passed in December of last year, and you know who presided over his funeral? Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis himself. Job well done.
Otherwise, signed, sealed, and delivered.
So what does that tell you? What does that tell you is the agenda of the Catholic Church? If you're a pedophile, if you're a monster, and you are a monster protector, you rise to the top, and you get rewarded. That is an insurgency more heinous, more despicable than anything you could possibly imagine from the deepest, darkest recesses of the Cold War. What could they possibly say about the Soviet Union during the worst times? And they infiltrated schools. You know what infiltrated schools? The Catholic Church infiltrated schools, public schools. Another great documentary, also a propaganda disinformation documentary, Disinformation by Omission, is the Keepers on Netflix, about the murder of now you have this sickening series of rapes and abuses at a Catholic high school in Baltimore. Now, Baltimore is named after Lord Calvert, the Roman Catholic aristocrat from England that established the colony and later state of Maryland for Rome. That's why Maryland is the source and the seat of America's power. Washington, D.C. The grounds of watch. This is crazy. This is in my book. Which book did I put? I can't remember which book. One of my 3 books. The grounds that eventually became our Capitol. By the way, Capitol comes from one of the 7 hills of Rome from the book of Revelation. Is that Revelation 17? The seven heads or 7 hills? I looked it up to be sure. The grounds that became our Capitol was owned by a Catholic, a sheriff named Francis Pope. Kid you not, I looked it up. Really creepy stuff. And then, of course, you had Pope Francis with his victory lap that occurred in 2015. Did you know that our Capitol building, the so-called White House, not named for its color, it's named after a Jesuit priest, Father Andrew White, S.J. And for let's go down this road a little bit further, that the breakdown of the beast of the land and the beast of the sea in, I want to say, Revelation 13 is basically describing to you how Rome, which is the 4th and final beast. Did you ever wonder why? Particularly in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's dream, the 4 empires of rebellion against God: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Why do they stop at Rome? Come on, Rome died as a nation by 500 A.D. Rome doesn't exist as a threat anymore. Why did Nebuchadnezzar's dream stop with Rome? Why did Daniel's dream stop with Rome? Rome didn't stop. It had the head wound and miraculously returned, reborn as the Holy Roman Empire. So it's described, and by the way, with amazing continuity between Daniel and John. Amazing continuity. Iron is the metal of Rome. And the fourth and final beast has teeth and claws of iron, connecting the two. Amazing continuity. So the beast of the land is indicative of the old world, Rome. Pardon me. The beast of the sea is indicative of the old world, Rome, because the sea is a metaphor for people. The beast of the land is us, is America, the United States. Land is indicative of a new nation with few people. And so when you see this subterfuge that claims that America is Babylon, America is not Babylon. The whore of Babylon sits in Rome. Who drinks from the whore's cup? Anyone who wants power, you go to the papacy. No, America is the beast that the harlot rides upon. She's been here from the very beginning. Rome does not have her own standing army. She made America her own standing army. I was just talking about this with my wife a little earlier. One of the best examples I have is Abu Ghraib. What happened at Abu Ghraib? Did a bunch of soldiers lose their minds, or was that just another example of the Inquisition? The Inquisition never died. It's the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. It still exists to this day. Look that up. Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith is the Inquisition. Oh, you know who one of the former heads of the Inquisition was? Pope Benedict. Joseph Ratzinger, whose brother has been accused of pedophilia.
Didn't Ratzinger also serve with him at one of the, I don't know what I would call it. Ratzinger sat next to Jesuit Karl Rahner to put together Vatican II. And he was also a member of the Nazi Youth. But he was not good enough. They gave him an offer he couldn't refuse so that they could replace him with an actual Jesuit. It's so amazing how we can go day to day and not know all this stuff.
It's buried. It's absolutely buried. And this is why I do what I do. And I have to say it's good that your audience is mainly Christian, because I have to give a disclaimer to my secular audiences. I apologize, but what brought me to this information is my born-again Christian faith. I was born and raised as a Roman Catholic. Italian. I'm 100% Italian. My derivation is 100% Italian. You can't do that and not be Catholic, not be born and raised. But I tell people I was 25 years a Catholic before I knew what it was to become a Christian, become a born-again Christian. So I do what I do because I'm born again, and the only thing I fear is disappointing Jesus Christ. But because this puppet master is the great harlot who sits upon 7 hills, how do you do that? How do you be familiar? Let me double check this. 7 hills. I know it's Revelation 17. And yep, bingo, 17. How do you know that it tells you specifically, the angel tells John very specifically 7 heads are 7 hills. The 7 hills of Rome are legendary. Legendary. How do you do that and still not say our eschatology, our prophecy as Christians has been rewritten by Jesuits? Futurism and preterism were written by Jesuits. Did you know that? Preterism, the idea that prophecy has already been fulfilled, was written by a Jesuit to distract from how easily and obviously Rome fulfills. Same thing with futurism. Alcazar and Libera are the Jesuits that helped put together futurism to distract this ludicrous idea that the Antichrist will just suddenly appear one day and that there will be a nation of Israel that the Antichrist makes a pact with and breaks 3.5 years through the pact, supposedly based on Daniel chapter 9. Absolute heresy, rewriting. The one who broke the pact was God himself. God himself broke his covenant with Israel when Israel denied his son. And even the King James does not properly capitalize that pronoun in Daniel 9, in those critical verses, 9, 25, 26, 27, 28. God himself breaks the covenant with Israel. Not the Antichrist. And there's another thing. Who is the Antichrist? Jesus himself said, many will come in my name. The Antichrist obviously uses the name of Christ, pretends to be him. And he says that them you will follow, but not me. So the people who are put in front of us as Antichrist, some future nebulous Muslim, Adolf Hitler, Napoleon, Mao Zedong, occasionally, very, 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 very rarely. Mao Zedong is enshrined as Joseph Stalin because they are mega monsters in the name of communism, which was created and propagated by the Catholic Church. So we don't really touch them as often. Mega monsters. Joseph Stalin, a Jew, raised to be a Jesuit priest. Did you know that? No. His last name, Druskashvili, is Georgian for of the Jewish people. And they love to use Jews. And they love to use non-members of their own people. That's why he was selected to be the monster tyrant of Russia. He was Georgian. He was raised to be a Jesuit priest. And I have this from his biographer, Cohen, also a Jew. Jesuit priest at the supposedly Orthodox seminary in Tiflis, Georgia, was secretly run by the Jesuits. The Jesuits had a foothold in Russia ever since their supposed suppression in, I think it was 1773. Where did they run? They ran to Russia and owned it all the way through to the Russian Revolution, so-called Red Revolution. So when have any of these monsters, Stalin murdered 40 million of his own people, Mao Zedong, and he's never Mao to me, by the way. How you call these monsters their first name is just a masterful art of propaganda. May have murdered as many as 70 million Chinese, and they still have pictures of this monster lauded and praised throughout China. Talk about propaganda.
And it's not taught. I mean, everything that we're taught in school, I mean, it's all propaganda. But I can remember in a social studies class learning about Stung. And then as an adult, and it's like the stories just don't... We never learned that he killed that many people, that just that he was some great ruler at that time that people worshipped and idolized.
Even at this secondary level of supposed secular communism, he's still thoroughly protected. That's why I laugh when people they get all upset over Hillary and Pizzagate, Jeffrey Epstein, even the mid-level puppets with blood all over their hands, Harvey Weinstein. Even when they're held up, nothing of substance happens to them. They're exposed for what they are as mid-level pedophiles and monsters, and they're still protected. Harvey Weinstein, the Jewish fall guy in Hollywood. Has he been brought up on charges? Has Hillary Clinton been brought up on charges? Never.
Mm-mm.
Never. And by the way, bring it back. Hold your thought, Kate, but bring it back to the Antichrist. And why it is that Rome fulfills our prophecies in eschatology and doctrine. When I was using those examples, Napoleon, Hitler, which one of them claimed to be the Messiah? None of them. Is there someone that sits this very day who claims to be Messiah, who claims to be equal with God himself, who has slaughtered more Christians than any other entity on the earth? That's the Pope. That's the vicar of Christ himself. When he speaks ex cathedra, he uses capital plural pronouns. Makes himself equal with God himself. Martin Luther said the Antichrist is the office of the papacy. All popes are Antichrist. We're just not taught that. We have no idea what it means. We just had our 500th anniversary last November 1st of Martin Luther's Reformation of Christianity. He wanted to reform the Catholic Church, and then he realized it was impossible. We have no idea what it means to be non-Catholic. Every Christian today is more Catholic than they are Christian. You believe Catholic doctrines, just like I just told you. Dispensationalism, the idea that God brought Israel back, that God's not done with Israel. Jesuit heresy. Ridiculously anti-Bible heresy. Ridiculously. Any Christian, a Christian child, can you have anything without Jesus Christ? If you say no, you're a good Christian. If you say yes, you're not a good Christian. Then how is it possible for God to be dealing corporately with the so-called children? It tells you, Paul tells you in Galatians 3, if you're a Jew and you deny Christ, you're going to hell. John the Baptist, one of the greatest Jews of all time, said, it doesn't matter if you claim that you're a hereditary child of Abraham. God can turn a stone into a child of Abraham. What matters, and this was the mystery that Paul talks about, is that salvation was taken corporately from Israel and given to the whole world on an individual basis. There is no such thing as corporate blessings, period. I say it again, there is no such thing as corporate blessings. You cannot be saved, you cannot be condemned by who you are. You are only saved and or condemned by what you do and whether or not you choose as an individual to take Jesus Christ into your heart and make him your Lord for the rest of your life. Not just a momentary thing. By the way, this is one of in our show a little while ago, this is our concerns and criticisms over the crusades of Billy Graham. Thousands of people saved at Billy Graham's crusade. Many of them turned over to the Catholic Church. You know that? When he found lapsed Catholics that he saved at a crusade, he turned them over to their local parish, their local diocese. When you do an altar call and then you go right back to your life, are you really saved? No. I would say no. So this whole idea of a climactic altar call is a false sense of security for the damned. You need a life-changing event to connect you in with a living relationship with Jesus Christ. Very similar to a marriage. That's why we're called the bride of Christ. You need to be radically altered, a new person who lives with Christ forever, from that moment all the way on. Not just running up to a stage and giving a memorized prayer, which, by the way, Jesus says don't do that. In Matthew chapter 6, right before he gives the outline for what has been called the Lord's Prayer, he says, do not use mindless repetition as the heathen do. And then he gives the outline for the Lord's Prayer, which becomes the most mindlessly repeated prayer in all humanity. So I got us off track there because I was going down as far as who is Antichrist. I didn't mean to, you were going to say something, Kate. Do you still remember, or did I throw you for a loop?
Oh, I remember. It was just everything you were saying was really interesting. Never worry about rabbit trails. we like them. You'd mentioned Harvey Weinstein, and was he Jesuit?
Only as much as a fall guy. Hollywood is the premier location to prop up Jews because it's very public, gets a lot of scrutiny, and has very little power. Weinstein is a great example, but an even better example is the guy that used to head up CBS, Paramount, Viacom as well, Sumner Murray Rothstein, who changed his name to Sumner Murray Redstone. And I want to say he was Jesuit educated, but I want to say he was one of those sly guys that started his Jesuit education and then left. I want to see if I can pull him up real quick. But anyway, A typical example. Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in real quick. I know that you've talked about the Catholics wanting to use Jews as fall guys. I wanted to bring to your attention, I'm sure you probably know about this, and I definitely think this also ties in. Are you familiar with the Jesuit priest by the name of Alberto Rivera?
Oh, yes. What a phenomenal source of information.
You know where I'm going with this?
I highly recommend anything. I don't, by the way. I highly recommend anything from Alberto. He's the only one that I would consider a true ex-Jesuit who became born again. If you see some of his passionate sermons, you really walk away with a solid feeling. You never know for sure if someone's saved or not, but you really know a tree by its fruit. So what do you have on Alberto?
Alberto was the one who came out and said that the Catholic Church created Islam.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, that was in a personal briefing that he got from a Jesuit superior, Cardinal Bay.
And secret meetings with the Jesuit, the head Jesuits.
Oh, yeah. And I want to, let's see, I gave that an actual separate chapter, is in Secret History. Let me pull that up real quick. Is Alberto's information on, and look, I don't want to.
Well, he compared everything between the Catholic Church and Islam, and I mean, when he's sitting there breaking it all down and saying this over here they're doing this, over here they're doing that. I mean, it's just like, my goodness, it's like they are identical. I mean, they're like clone carbon copies almost.
Rosary beads. The number of nuns, people dedicated. Just the numbers. Muhammad having his seminal moment in a cave, his life-changing moment in a cave, just like Ignatius Loyola. The number of, this is chapter 3 in my book, Secret History. Let's see here. Earning your salvation is another part of Islam. Works versus grace. Very, very critical difference between the two. Fatima was one of Muhammad's favorite daughter, right? And then we had this supposed vision by these 3 children in Portugal, in the village of Fatima, which was completely engineered to bring Muslims closer to Catholics. So, absolutely. And I do cover this in chapter 3 of my second book, Secret History. I consider Alberto a phenomenal source of information in comparison to, say, Malachi Martin, who supposedly left the Jesuits but maintained himself as a Roman Catholic priest. So right there, I question whether or not, very often you see someone, the guy who trained Barack Obama to be a community organizer, Greg Galuzzo, supposedly left the Jesuits in Chicago. I don't believe it for a minute. They say that to get plausible deniability. I can't believe that works in any way, shape, or form. Malachi Martin, as popular as he was. Oh, my goodness. Malachi Martin's book, The Jesuits, sits on my shelf as he rewrites history and says, the Jesuits were so good until the 1960s when they became communists. So that was his effort. That was his propaganda effort to keep conservative Catholics. I call them, warmly, I call them Latin Mass Catholics, pre-Vatican II Catholics. I hope they understand, like I said earlier, Karl Rahner, as a Jesuit, was the one who helped write Vatican II, along with Joseph Ratzinger. So I don't believe anyone outside of Alberto Rivera as far as leaving being a Jesuit priest, walking away. He's the only one I say is an ex-Jesuit priest. Phenomenal information that we have from him. Just what a great source. And he may have been murdered. He may have been assassinated. As the story goes, his wife, his widow, said that he had a really unusual and uncomfortable trip to the dentist where he felt that he was injected with something at the dentist.
He was poisoned.
And was poisoned, and he died shortly after. So,
But yeah, it's an amazing breakdown. If you can go online and find the video where Alberto's talking about Islam and Catholics, how similar they actually are. And like I said, he comes right out and he lays it out. He's like, look, I was involved in several secret meetings with the upper Jesuits, and they were telling us that, this was all manufactured, that Islam was literally created so that they could get back into the Holy Land.
A few people can argue with, and I try not to offend Muslims. I said, look, at the bare minimum, Rome has manipulated your religion. Muhammad's wife and uncle were Catholic. And his first wife was Catholic. And, let's see here if I can pull up some names, places, and dates here. Let's see here. Scanning my chapter 3. Yeah, there's a lot of information. Let's see here. Yeah, it's hard to get these.
Another thing I was also going to ask you is, do you ever touch on the Pink Pope?
As far as
them being homosexual and all the homosexual stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of information in front of me on a specific Pink Pope. I will tell you that homosexuality is part and parcel to the priesthood, unfortunately. It is a central part of the priesthood. For instance, there were a news story of a couple of priests who were ejected from seminary because they were caught in homosexual acts. I immediately don't believe it. I think that they probably were good guys that did the wrong thing and angered the wrong people, or they were just picked as sacrifices. I actually have a story of one of the Swiss guards who are, the needless vow of celibacy. It guarantees sexual crimes taking place in the Vatican, in the clergy. When you force human beings to deny their sex drives, days, months, weeks, years, it's going to have a tragic negative outlet. The natural state of human beings is to be bonded in marriage. From a Christian point of view, is to be bonded in marriage and to share that with a husband and a wife. And so when you deny that to a normal human being, and years go by, you're guaranteeing problems. You're guaranteeing crimes are going to occur. So I'm scanning for more names as in that chapter on. Oh, let's see here on Islam, because I really would like to do that for you.
Yeah, I just watched that probably 2 days ago. And like I said, I was just like, man, I forgot all about this. It's like I definitely need to try to remember this so I can bring it up and talk to Johnny about it.
Yeah, the most pious Shia like to flagellate themselves in honor of the sufferings of Ali and Hussein. The son-in-law, think of son-in-law of Muhammad. So flagellation, very strong Roman Catholic ritual of beating yourself because of sin. Let's see here. Yeah, the widow Khadijah. Her cousin was Waraqwa, a very faithful Roman Catholic. And these were the ones that helped and believed in Muhammad. Muhammad studied the works of St. Augustine to prepare for his calling. And was aided by Catholics along the way. And I cover this in chapter 3. Let's see if I can get some more names and places and dates for you. Under Waraqwa's direction, Muhammad wrote that Abraham offered Ishmael as a sacrifice rather than Isaac. So, yeah, a lot of interesting. At the bare minimum, we make an excellent case for Islam being manipulated by Rome. Yeah, so that's all that I'm seeing coming up for me. You guys obviously have to edit out these long pauses.
Oh, yeah, that's part of the reason I like being able to edit.
Let's see here. What do I have as this source? Wikipedia, Waraqwa and Khadijah, first cousins removed. Yeah. It was Waraqwa and Khadijah who encouraged Muhammad that his terrifying visions were indeed from an angel. But he suffered paralysis during these visions. And he was afraid that he was going to hell. And as I said, without Waraqwa or Khadijah, there would be no Islam. And there's the Catholic connection right there.
A lot of manipulation.
Absolutely.
Well, not only that, but they build their churches on pagan sites. That's another thing that they had in common.
It was a Catholic monk, Bahira, that helped Muhammad write the Quran. I've got the sources on that. The Catholic monk Bahira, Bahira, helped Muhammad write the Quran. So that when you no longer have the enemies of Islam in the Middle Ages, they're recreated by the CIA and today. There is no such thing as modern Islamic terror. It is completely, wholly fabricated. You may have a handful of crazies that actually believe slaughtering innocent people is the right thing to do as a Muslim, but the vast majority do not. And they are fabricated. Guantanamo Bay. It was Barack Obama's, I want to say it was like his number 8th most important promise is to close Guantanamo Bay. Surprise, surprise, 8 years later, he never did. Why? Where's Guantanamo Bay? Guantanamo Bay is in the island nation of our communist enemy, Cuba. How is the United States Navy has a base on Cuba? How is that even possible? That's because both answer to Rome. The Castros were their emperors until not too long ago. Really, just a couple months ago, right? Fidel and his brother Raul, both excellent Roman Catholics. Now, the CIA clearly is the institution that murdered John F. Kennedy. Number one, how is that even possible? From trafficking in drugs, murdering presidents, sex trafficking people and children. Our worst enemy doesn't do these evil things, and yet our own intelligence agency that we rely on and trust to keep us safe from foreign enemies, that's the one doing this? How is that even possible? The same reason that it's possible for the CIA to murder Kennedy, and yet to allow a Littleton dictator in an island nation that could easily be swatted, Fidel Castro, to stay there for decades until he died in his office. How is that even possible? They all answered to Rome. Fidel was trained at 3 different Jesuit institutions. Some clowns of propaganda claim that he managed to survive 600 assassination attempts. Well, they must not have been very good. What did they try to do? Kill him with cotton candy? What? How many? We just throw a BB at him? Come on.
I know that they tried to kill Phil Snyder, I think, at least 13 times, and I think it was the 14th attempt that they actually got him.
Yeah, Phil Schneider, the alien guy, the guy that talks about underground bases and aliens. I'm sure there's nothing squirrely or nothing to be concerned over with his testimony. But where was it? See, Guantanamo Bay. What was in Guantanamo Bay? Guantanamo Bay. Why is it important that facility, that black site? First of all, why is it not on American soil? It's so that they can subvert the laws that are binding on American soil are not binding on the Cuban soil. You can do whatever you want to people. So they grab innocent Middle Easterners, throw them in Guantanamo Bay, torture them, fill them with hatred for America, and then release them. I have open source information that the individual that led the attack on Benghazi in Libya was released from Guantanamo Bay. What did they do? Give him directions? Give him training while he was there? How is that even possible, guys? How is that even possible? The level of treason must be phenomenal. What is the common factor? Rome.
So that's where all roads lead.
Let me give another example. Let's see here. James Mad Dog Mattis. What is he? Secretary of Defense? Secretary of War for Trump? Right?
I believe so.
Mad Dog Mattis, former United States Marine Corps general, right? Mad Dog Mattis. Wikipedia has no information whatsoever on his religious background. Complete mystery. Something that should raise some concern. He spent his entire life and he's never been married. He's known as the warrior monk. Oh, really? Okay. I have some insider information that says that he is a secret Roman Catholic. This is what you were talking about earlier. Okay. And let me take a second and give the source, because it's definitely not Wikipedia. Oh, let's see here. It is, I had to dig for this one. Okay, let's see. Armed Forces Journal admits that when he goes to war, he brings a copy of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. That's not what I wanted. Here, I'm bragging on this. The National Catholic Register.
About Trump's Catholic warriors?
Yes, do you have that?
Uh-huh.
That's a phenomenal piece. I'm sure they're regretting it. They're probably taking it down right now.
What is it? Is it just a list of names?
It's
not
just a list of
Trump's
Catholic warriors. And yep, there he is, James Mattis. The warrior monk who's never been married. Oh, I have a list. I don't want to slow down my computer. I have a list that's 35 long and counting of all the Catholics and the Jesuit trained Catholics and the Goldman Sachs folks and the occasional Jewish Goldman Sachs folks. But I tell people, look, the relationship is with the Catholics and the Patsy Jews. I call them tongue-in-cheek, I call them papal court Jews. It's the exact same relationship at the crucifixion of Christ. You had an extremely popular Jewish rabbi who was a threat to the power structure. And Jewish leaders betrayed their nation and cavorted with the hated Romans. The Jews, the average Jew, hated the Roman occupiers. And yet, the Pharisees and the Jewish leadership went groveling to Pilate and begged him to execute Jesus Christ. And, of course, the Jews themselves didn't have that power. They were afraid. How many times do you read in Scripture that they tried to seize or to kill Christ, but they couldn't because they were afraid of his popularity with the people? So what did the traitor Jewish leaders do? They went groveling to Pilate and begged him to do the dirty work for them. And that is the exact same relationship that runs to this very day. A handful of traitor Jews, but the real power is Rome. And that's the way I usually explain the relationship. But Rome plays up the Jewish frontmen, usually ones with no power, from Mark Zuckerberg to Harvey Weinstein. What power do these individuals? They have none. They're just Jewish names and faces to rile people up, froth them up. Because when you're filled with ethnic hatred, you disconnect your brain. You have the inability to connect dots, which is what I try to do with names, places, and dates. How many times I've been in a serious discussion and have someone mindlessly say it's the Jews?
On that article that you brought up a while ago, it says here Mattis is on record as valuing the counsel of the church, albeit in this instance in a battlefield context. In a 2003 interview with PBS, he explained how he leaned on advice from a chaplain in deciding how to win over Iraqis. On the suggestion of my Catholic chaplain, the Marines would take children or chilled drinking water in bottles and walk out amongst the protesters and hand it out. It is just hard to throw a rock at somebody who has given you a cold drink of water and 120 degrees outside, Mattis said.
Now, if that's what's being admitted by a mainstream media source, how much deeper does it really go? A lot. A lot deeper. Like we were talking about earlier, the United States does not work. The military of the United States doesn't belong to us. How many times have we seen, we'll go back to Abu Ghraib, how many times have we been humiliated based on the crimes of our government and our military? They don't work for us. The United States of America is the sword arm of the Catholic Church. Here's proof that I like to bring up often. A tree is known by its fruit. Everywhere the United States military has gone, Christians suffer. Everywhere the United States military has gone, Christians suffer. Who does that? Who's got a track record for that? Have you heard of Fox? We talked about this last time. Have you heard of Fox's Book of Martyrs? It used to be John Fox's Acts and Monuments. An entire, now several volumes of torture and killing of Christians by the Catholic Church. I've got an article on the last Christian church to be demolished in Afghanistan. These are stable countries. Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. It is infinitely more difficult to live in as a Christian now after United States intervention than it was previously under the stable, supposed dictatorial governments. Gaddafi, Hussein. The Taliban. It was easier for Christians. It was better for the Christians to live under the Taliban. Do you know the poppy fields were illegal under the Taliban? You know who guards them now? Marines and soldiers in Afghanistan. That's a fact.
Not to sound stupid, but is that because of the drug that they get from it?
That's because the CIA markets the drug. That's because the CIA wants the poppy fields open so that it can capitalize all the. Look up another register that. Let's see if I have this. Why Catholics thrive in the CIA, the Catholic Herald. May 6, 2016. Gee, I wonder. Because it was founded by a Roman Catholic, Knight of Malta, William Donovan. So how about that? So the intervention, one of the biggest things to happen in the intervention in Afghanistan is that the growing of poppy and manufacturing of heroin is illegal under the Taliban. Now, after the intervention of the United States, it's thriving. That's what the CIA wanted. Who runs the CIA? The Vatican. Unbelievable crimes. Unbelievable. That's why I got out of the military. My enemies aren't overseas. My enemies are in America, the United States.
At that time, did you come to that conclusion from what you had seen or what you were
I personally
hearing?
experienced it. I personally experienced it. I was the one that had to do, when I was in Iraq, I spent more time on gender sensitivity classes than I did tactics, techniques, and procedures of the enemy. We had HESCO barriers to protect us from shrapnel. And on the HESCO barriers, they had posters of warning us not to tell dirty jokes.
They didn't have you guys out there marching around in high heels or anything, did they?
Not yet, but I'm sure it's on its way.
Oh, no, they've done it. They've done it.
Yeah.
Well, that was brought in by Leon Panetta. Leon Panetta, good Roman Catholic, who was former Secretary of Defense, former director of the CIA, trained by the Jesuits at Santa Clara, as was Janet Napolitano, one of the first, if not the first, right? Director of Homeland Security, former governor of Arizona, also a graduate of Santa Clara, the Jesuits. Leon Panetta opened the door to the transgenders joining the military, and yes, this is part of why I knew it was time to get out. They blew up that woman that supposedly saved the day after the engine blew up in her plane, and said, "Oh, she was a Navy fighter pilot." Did you know that the first female naval fighter pilot killed herself in a routine carrier landing? Cara Holt-Green. Because they leapfrogged her in Pensacola in flight school when she had no right to be there. They get like 2 critical errors in flight school, in Navy flight school, and they give her 5, and surprise, surprise, she killed herself in a routine carrier landing. There's the first female Navy fighter pilot.
It's horrible.
Yeah, they want the military to be incompetent. Because in the long run, they want as many Americans, the same thing with the children. They want as many kids to be raped and mauled as possible. They hate us. It's the whore of Babylon. Who teaches that? No one teaches that. What Christian, Protestant, they're not even Protestant, what church teaches you that Rome is the whore of Babylon?
Well, I mean, it's actually also said that a lot of times that these wars are created so that they can separate children from their families and stuff.
Absolutely. That's a fact. In fact, I mentioned that in Eaters of Children. They did it to Jewish families. I mentioned a Time article.
It makes it that much easier for them to traffic these children because they get separated from their parents, and war-torn countries. I mean, everybody's just trying to get out and get away alive, and like you said, they're completely separated, and the children are just there for the easy pickings.
Absolutely, and I give examples, particularly of Libya. What happens when you take a stable nation and turn it upside down? Human trafficking skyrockets.
I mean, look at the UN. The UN, they're always talking about the UN, the white helmets and all this, and how they're always involved in human trafficking and pedophilia. And It's not just, it's, when it happens a couple of times, it might be coincidence, but when it happens over and over and over and over, it's like you just see this recurring pattern that's just nonstop, never ending.
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Kay, yeah.
One of the prime targets is when we have the severe weather. I mean, that's fertile ground for children to be taken for trafficking. Because the parents are separated, kids are put here, or they're picked up off the street, and then they are streamed into trafficking, and the parents never know what happened.
Anytime that there is chaos introduced, there's opportunities. And Chad, you're right on it. You're absolutely right on it. That is part of the thought process when needless wars are fabricated to create chaos as a smokescreen to increase these criminal activities. Absolutely.
Well, there's plenty of times I have conversations with people, and they always want to say, well, we need to go over there and we need to do this. I'm like, why? It's like, we're not the world's police force. It's like, that's not the job of the American military. It's like some of these countries, they need to be taking care of this stuff on their own. They don't need outside sources coming in there and destabilizing everything and creating all this chaos.
Well, and not only that, but the crimes that are supposedly being committed are also being blown out of proportion by propagandists. You cannot trust any media source. And so they rationalize this, they to the point of fabricating crimes. So you have no idea, for instance, to this very day, we have no idea what was going on in with David Koresh. Whether or not he was really committing crimes, whether children were at risk. Even if they were at risk, they burned the children alive. Was that a good solution? Did Jesuit trained at Georgetown Bill Clinton do a good job?
The biggest thing about Waco is he left he did not stay on the compound all the time. He left quite frequently. He went out and played rock and roll and was out trying to get other people recruiting and this and that. So he left quite a bit. And it's like, if he was such a threat, why didn't they just take him when he left the compound, when he was driving down the road and it was just him and a couple other people?
Clearly the agenda was to punish everyone there. When they lit the complex on fire, that was a criminal activity.
Well, when you look at everything that went down there, and it's not just that. I mean, Ruby Ridge is another one that really, really, I tell people all the time, it's like this guy just moved out in the middle of nowhere, wanted to be away from the government, wanted nothing to do with it because he had been in the government. He knew how corrupt it had become, and he feared for his family. That's why they moved out in the middle of nowhere and was living off the grid so that if things went south, that they would be able to sustain and take care of themselves. And they sent in agents constantly trying to get him to do this or do that, buy this, buy that. And finally, it was something about he sawed off a shotgun or something like an inch or 2 inches or maybe half an inch. It was so ridiculous. And then they started putting up deer cameras all over his property, and he started seeing them. And he knew that there was people out there on his property that were watching him. He didn't know who it was, but he knew something was up. And the whole thing jumped off when his 2 kids were out walking the dog, and there was agents on his property, fully armed to the teeth. And when the dog, either smelled them or saw them or something, it started barking and running towards them. Well, the agents popped up out of the bushes, and they literally they shot the dog and killed the dog. Well, of course, the kids had shotguns on them, and whenever the dog got shot, the youngest one, the 12-year-old, he fired on the agents. He didn't know who the hell it was, just somebody shooting his dog. What was going on. And then they shot the other, the 12-year-old got killed right there. The other one took off running, and they shot him as well, but, he was able to get away. And whenever they were running in the house at one point, the mother was holding the door open. She was standing there with a newborn baby in her arms, and a sniper literally shot and killed her and the baby both. She got shot in the face. And, it's like, this is happening on American soil, and people are like, well, they were just crazies and this and that. Regardless of what you think, that should be frightening to you that this was actually going on in American soil. These were federal agents doing this. And, if it can happen to them, it could happen to you. It could happen to me. It could happen to any of us. And with things like the NDAA and all that, it's like, you should be afraid of the government. You should be armed to the teeth, and you should be prepared to defend yourself and your family if it comes down to it. I mean, that is your God-given right. And a lot of Christians are like, well, we're not supposed to think like that. It's like, even Jesus told, the disciples, he said, look, if you don't have a sword, you better go sell your cloak and get one. Back in those times when, the disciples were walking around, it was literally a crime to have a sword unless you were in the Roman military. And, that was punishable by death. But, the two of the disciples carried swords. And, Jesus told him, he said, you better, if you don't have one, you better get one. You better have one. You should be able to protect yourself.
I have at least one source that I have not vetted or verified, but a pretty decent source, that says that the FBI sniper who slaughtered Vicki Weaver, she was holding her little infant girl in her arms, Lon Cirucci. I have at least one source that claims that he was Jesuit trained. And he was also moved after he murdered Vicki Weaver to do Overwatch at Waco, at the Waco siege. Whether or not he slaughtered other women holding their babies there, I don't know.
Yeah, because that's pretty frightening about how the whole Koresh thing went down. I mean, they went armed to the teeth, and they whenever he came outside, he was unarmed. They automatically started firing on him and everybody else, and then it wasn't even a few days later that they rolled tanks in. Tanks? Are you serious?
Well, here's an interesting aspect to this that no one talks about. Very few people talk about. The Branch Davidians, and I asked earlier, is there anyone who teaches? There are no evangelical churches anywhere, mainstream churches anywhere that teach that Rome is the whore of Babylon. None. There is a Christian religion that does, Seventh-day Adventists. Now, Seventh-day Adventists do have some questionable doctrines. I've done a lot of looking into Adventism. Seventh-day Adventism was founded by a Freemason, William Miller. Never a good sign. Founded in the 1800s during a spate of Freemasonic religions, including Mormonism. Again, not a good sign. Miller, a prediction in 1843 that humiliated all of his followers, claiming that Jesus Christ would return. Many of them sold everything they had. And he, surprise, surprise, was found to be inaccurate. What did he do? He made the claim again in 1844 and fooled more people and humiliated Christians everywhere. Now, that being said, I will not say that Adventism is heretical or a cult. Now, the Branch Davidians are an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventists. Gee, I wonder if they were targeted specifically by the trained President Bill Clinton. Something to think about. The only Christian religion that names Rome as the whore of Babylon as a religion, not as an individual. And those were the guys at Waco, Branch Davidians, an offshoot of the Adventists, where 80 women and children, men, women, and children were burned alive, just like the Inquisition does. Has anybody in the FBI ever been brought up on charges? No, they took the surviving Branch Davidians and put them on charges. How about that for justice?
And they've all been hushed.
Absolutely. And this goes back to the beginning where we've talked, as I said, where's the beef? Show me the money. Don't believe any reports. Oh, Donald Trump's draining the swamp. Don't believe it. when you see the big names in irons in an orange jumpsuit, when you see them prosecuted, when you see them going to prison, when you see them being duly punished, then you could say, well, maybe there's something here.
Yeah, that's never going to happen at all.
So all these stories of Donald Trump has done nothing of substance, particularly on his watershed issue of illegal immigration. He's done absolutely nothing, and he will do nothing. I tell people, you have been snowed. Donald Trump will close the borders in the same amount of time that Barack Obama closed Guantanamo Bay. Never.
Well, they still haven't done anything about socialized medicine either. The Obamacare is still in effect.
Now the Democrats, the second Barack Obama got into office, they had control of the House, the Senate, and the Father Andrew White House. The second they did, Jesuit mentored Nancy Pelosi, far-left Roman Catholic, slammed the doors on the handful of Republicans and took a broke medical system and destroyed what was left of it with socialized medicine.
Well, not only that,
Since
remember,
then,
even when it went before the federal judges, remember that? And they ruled that, it wasn't a penalty tax, or that it was a penalty, or that it was a tax or whatever.
Each time their gatekeepers keep it in place. Since then, the Republicans have owned Congress and the White House and done nothing. How is it that when the Democrats own Congress and the White House, America gets yanked hard to the left, and when the Republicans own Congress and the White House, nothing changes? It's because they all answer to the same.
Yeah, they're all walking lockstep. I've tried telling people that numerous times, that there is no right or left, that they're all walking together, arm in arm.
But what we do here and what we're doing today is we're explaining to people who is above them, who is guiding them. Rome, the Vatican. Let me give you a quick example. Speaker of the House. They don't control every one of the 535 legislators in Congress, just the key ones. Speaker of the House. How many different overtly Catholics have there been? I haven't even searched this specifically. These are just names that come up over time, and I just keep track of them. So 2010, you had Nancy Pelosi, trained, mentored by Father Stephen J. Privet, S.J., former president of San Francisco University. San Francisco University, that sounds public, right? Now it's a Jesuit university. She turned the gavel over to John Boehner. What happened between... What radical changes did John Boehner make to Nancy Pelosi's policies and laws? None. Zero. John Boehner, trained by the Jesuits at Xavier. John Boehner turned the gavel over to devout Roman Catholic Paul Ryan, good little altar boy. Before them was Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich, converted Roman Catholic. His wife Callista is now the ambassador to the Vatican. What happened during Reagan? Do you know Ronald Reagan was baptized, born and raised Roman Catholic?
I was not aware of that.
You know his father was a Knight of Columbus?
Was not aware of that either.
Yeah, coincidence. And so I tell people you need to wake up, because Reagan has been enshrined as this wonderful, heroic, quote, conservative. What occurred during Ronald Reagan's 8 years?
I know a lot of people flipped out over Reaganomics. The whole trickle-down thing.
Subterfuge. Absolute subterfuge. What actually occurred? The substance. What was the substance of the Reagan years? More government, more illegal aliens, massive more gun control. The 1984 Firearm Owners Protection Act. If you ever want to know what a piece of legislation does, you just take its name and invert it. The Reagan years were just as bad as any other. What is Reagan's great claim to fame? The communist fighter. With who? Pope St. John Paul II. You take that out, if you understand it's completely manipulated, you take that out of the equation, Ronald Reagan was just as left-wing, and that's what he was. For the vast majority of his life, he was hard left. All of a sudden, he got rebranded as this great Christian conservative. Show me the money, Jerry. What did he really do? More illegal aliens, more taxes, more government, more gun control. No difference. He just might as well have kept Carter in.
I don't know so much about the Christian thing because, like I said, I know that the Reagans had seances in the White House. I remember that.
Of course. He was born and raised Catholic. Born and raised Catholic. That's how he got there. As a matter of fact, Kathy O'Brien, who says that she is tortured into being a sex slave by the CIA, claims that Reagan was one of her abusers, along with George H.W. Skull and Bones Bush. Skull and Bones 48. That's Bush number 41. Skull and Bones Bush number 41. Don't get him confused with Skull and Bones Bush number 43. Because that's what happens in America. We really don't have anybody qualified in 300 million people. We got to have sons and daughters of elected officials hold their seats of power. Like some aristocracy. Like some feudal aristocracy, which we basically have. That elections are a joke. And
yep.
Surprise, surprise, who was at the center of it? The Vatican. From the Roman Catholic Democrat Dodds in Connecticut all the way across to the Roman Catholic phony Republican Murkowski's Alaska. From Connecticut to Alaska. Generationally giving father to son, father to daughter, holding power. When you see somebody in Congress, you see a representative in Congress, Barbara Milkolsky from Maryland, setting a record for the longest sitting woman, far left Democrat, Roman Catholic in good standing. What's that, like 45 years now? How is it even humanly possible for someone to get reelected? That's 22 times? How do you get reelected 22 times? Massive corruption. Systemic corruption. All roads lead to Rome.
Yep, they do. Yeah, I think that's a good place for us to end this discussion for this evening. So
we definitely have you back again, Johnny.
You're making it easy for me. We keep doing these in the middle of the day. I can't ever turn you down. I wouldn't anyway.
That sounds good. This was very enlightening tonight, and
well, you did a great job setting me up with questions too. I had an excellent opportunity to take your bullet points and study up for them. So
awesome.
You keep doing that. You're gonna set me up really well.
Great. That's something I'm not used to, but I'm working at it. So
worked really well. Really appreciate it because it's just information to manage. Kay, there's just so much. It really
is. And your book is so good. Could you please let everyone know where they can purchase Eaters of Children and your other books? Absolutely.
Illuminati Unmasked, Secret History, and Eaters of Children. All three are available on Amazon.com. I went by my full name, Giovanni Agostino Cirucci, for this last book versus my nickname, Johnny, on the first two books. But they'll all come up. They should all come up together. So.
And listen to you.
Absolutely, yeah. My website, johnnycirucci.com, JOHNNYCARUCCI.com. You write me, Johnny at johnnycirucci.com. I have a podcast, Resistance Rising, off Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker, iTunes, and you can just go directly to my website. All of my podcasts and interviews can be found right there on my website, and including all of ours. So can you just send me your link, and I will mirror it on johnnycirucci.com, guys.
That's appreciated. And one last thing, can you let everyone know how they can contact you, please?
Absolutely, yeah. My Skype is Johnny_Cirucci. Like I said, my website, johnnycirucci.com, and you can write me at johnny@johnnycirucci.com.
It doesn't get any easier than that, folks. So take a listen to his podcast, read his books, and stay tuned. And I'm going to go ahead and say tonight's closing prayer. Everyone ready?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us all together tonight. And please let this broadcast fall on listening ears and open the minds up and let people understand what is really going on, that you're trying to wake us up, Father. Please let that alarm be heard. Please look after our listeners as they go through this oncoming week, and look after Johnny and Chad and myself, and bless everyone. And we love you, Lord, and we thank you for everything that you do. And for anyone who's listening hasn't heard your call, Father, let them hear it now. Let them come to you, Father. We are all your children, and we know that you love us, and you treat us so well. I pray this in Jesus' holy and mighty name. Amen.
Amen. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, that's going to do it for tonight, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We pray that you have a blessed week. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Into the night, I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true.